The following program is brought to you by the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg and the Catholic Communication Campaign. Visit us on the web at hbgdiocese.org.
Franciscan Media and this local station present American Catholic Radio, Disciples Called to Witness. Production of American Catholic Radio is made possible by the generous contributions of you, our listener. And now, here's our host.
Welcome to American Catholic Radio presents Disciples Called to Witness, a program designed to help you know your faith so you can grow in your faith and share it. I'm your host, Judy Zarek. Has your parish had their summer festival yet? Almost every Catholic parish in my city has one. And if they don't have a summer festival, then they usually have some event during the year where everyone in the parish is invited to attend or volunteer so that they can make additional funds needed to help keep the parish running. For some people, it may be the only time they see their fellow parishioners outside of Sunday Mass. And I think that's too bad, because it's important to connect with other believers, not just in church, but in the real world too. It's easy to compartmentalize our friends and acquaintances as our church friends or our work friends. But when events bring everyone together in another setting, it's great to realize that your church friends are actually just your friends. When things are more relaxed, such as at a festival or evening potluck, it's easier to reach out and engage other people. And these types of events tend to attract people outside of our normal circles, people who may be interested in learning about the Catholic faith. What if we could bring that type of atmosphere into the gathering spaces of our churches? What if people were more open to greeting one another as they entered the church, or even inviting a friend to come to church with them? I know that attending Mass is a more formal way of prayer, but it doesn't mean that we have to be somber and inattentive toward others around us. Today, we're going to hear about how parish life is an integral part of the new evangelization. I spoke with Tom Corcoran for our Sharing Faith segment today. He shares with me the story of how his parish went from being pretty much a complacent community to become a vibrant and active one. And in our Discovering Faith interview, John Feaster will talk with Catholic chaplain Father Gary Castor, who works with young adults at Williams College in Massachusetts. We have a great show lined up for you today, so let's get started. And as always, let's see if you can guess this week's Saint of the Week.
Who am I? I was born on the Spanish island of Majorca, but my name is probably better known in the U.S. and Mexico, where I spent decades in the missions. Not that what I did before then, mostly teaching, was unimportant. It's just that I was born to be a missionary. Still, as much as I loved the work and the life, it was not without its challenges and controversy. I arrived in what was then called New Spain, present-day Mexico and Texas, in 1749. I was in my mid-30s, full of zeal and energy, and eager to convert the native peoples of the New World. I got off the ship at Veracruz and began to make my way to Mexico City, a 250-mile walk, when I suffered an insect bite on my leg that would cause me so much suffering for the rest of my life. But my motto was always forward, never back, and I lived it. In 1769, I traveled north to begin my ministry in Upper California. I guess that's where I really left my mark, as I established 9 of the 21 Franciscan missions that dot the Pacific coast of the United States. The first mission was at San Diego. Others that followed included Monterey Carmel, San Antonio, San Luis Obispo, San Francisco, and San Juan Capistrano. Remember the reference I made earlier to some controversy surrounding me? I think I should explain a bit more. My work, and that of my fellow missionaries, was to Christianize the native peoples and integrate them into the Spanish way of life. We also taught them new skills like farming, ranching, and construction. By today's standards, some would judge us as not having sufficient respect for their native religion, or for imposing European values on them. But I hope you believe me when I say that I did my best to treat the local people with the respect they deserved as beloved children of God, by bringing them the gift of faith and helping them reach a decent standard of living. I like to think I proved myself through my efforts to bring about the first significant legislation in California for Native Americans, a so-called Bill of Rights. In turn, their love for me was in evidence at my death in 1784. At my beatification in 1988, Pope John Paul II called me an exemplary model of the selfless evangelizer. My statue representing the state of California has been in the U.S. Capitol since 1931. Who am I? I am St. Junipero Serra.
You're listening to American Catholic Radio presents Disciples Called to Witness. Our Catholic faith must be reflected in our everyday lives if we hope to evangelize others. In our Sharing Faith segment up next, I'll introduce you to someone who is willing to communicate and witness that faith. Associate to the pastor Tom Corcoran and pastor of the Church of the Nativity, Father Michael White, have worked hard to transform their parish in Timonium, Maryland. Tom recalls his first impression with the parish 16 years earlier when he and his family joined.
In kind of retrospect and looking back at the church, again, we said it was very kind of sleepy church, that had a lot of opportunity here, but the church had put a lot of energy to get established and started. But once it got established, it kind of, for lack of a better word, was coasting a little bit. I think this happens in a lot of churches. You begin to think people don't feel obliged to go to church anymore, that almost we start to feel like the problem is the people. We have this kind of self-defeatism that, well, we can't get people to come to church and people just aren't interested anymore, and that's just the way it is.
Tom and Father Michael together wrote a book about their parish's story called Rebuilt, Awakening the Faithful, Reaching the Lost, and Making Church Matter. One of the first things they did several years ago was to take a look at how other churches, like the new megachurches popping up around the country, seem to be attracting people to worship.
For us, when we went to some of these churches and we saw people going to church, we saw people at the churches who had just had a lively faith and a joy. We recount in Rebuilt about how we went to Saddleback Church, and the people there were just so welcoming and lovely. And Father White said how he recounts how he went in one door and then went in another door just to see if it would happen again, and that saw that happen again and experienced that. And like, this kind of gave us a vision for this is what the church should be like. The experience of coming to church should be a joyous occasion for people. You know, I rejoiced when they said, "Let us go to the house of the Lord."
After seeing how some other churches were successful in having a vibrant community, Father Michael and Tom then turned their focus to their own parish. They decided to look at some of the programs that were already in place.
We had done these family-friendly Fridays for many years, and they had grown to about 650 people. At one point, we had this aha moment, especially Father White, that we were just creating these consumerisms as we were providing free food, but they were complaining about the free food. And so after this kind of aha moment, kind of learning some things from other churches, we came back and we took these Fridays, and instead of making them a consumeristic exchange, we challenged the people that were coming, saying, hey, as a church, we're going forward, we're going to change direction, and we're going to ask you to serve, and we're going to ask you to love one another in small groups, and these are changes that are coming. And we kind of started with that group of people, and it was funny that 650 people shrunk to about 200 people that kept coming. That was okay, though. We knew that's kind of a pruning process that God undergoes, and a lot didn't change at first, but it was kind of laying the groundwork and laying the foundation of that we were going to be a church that, one, began to focus on people who were not coming to church, and second, that church people and the people already here in the pews, we were going to challenge them to serve the people who are not coming. If you challenge people that have kind of gotten comfortable, most likely you're going to have pushback.
As Tom mentioned, some people stopped attending the events they were used to when things began to change. But the members who stayed found a new sense of commitment and joy in their parish.
From the time that Father White came here until now, we've almost tripled in attendance on a weekend. There's been a great increase in financial support and giving to the church. As I mentioned earlier, a great increase in volunteerism and people volunteering their time. Over and above that, there's a spirit to the church that certainly was not here before that now matches, I think, what we had seen at these other churches, that when people come to our church and wind up joining our church, we hear over and over again that it's warm and it's welcoming. That's what's led them to the parish. Other liturgical issues are falling to the left or to the right and being overly conservative or left. At the point, we try to just stay focused on the mission of Christ, which is to make disciples and to reach out to the people who are not connecting to Christ. I think one of the greatest mistakes parishes make is trying to do too much. As Catholic parishes, we need to try probably do less, not more, and do what we do excellently and practice it.
If you're interested in helping your parish become the vibrant, active, and faith-filled community you want to be a part of, check out Tom Corcoran and Father Michael White's book, Rebuilt. You'll read about how they failed, kept trying, and finally succeeded. You can also go to their website for more resources at www.rebuiltparish.com. And Tom wants to make it clear that you don't have to be a parish priest or work for the church to read and get a lot out of this book.
I think anybody can read that who cares about what's happening in the church right now.
For Sharing Faith, I'm Judy Zarek.
Studies show that people who pray regularly and practice their faith are healthier and happier. I'm Bishop Ronald Gaynor. I want to invite you to experience a positive difference in your life by visiting your Catholic parish and encountering Jesus through the sacraments. Do it for your family, do it for yourself, and come home. Remember that God's mercy is and always will be there for you, no matter what your situation. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org to find a parish near you.
I'm not Catholic, but I really love working at Catholic Volunteer Network and being around those who are Catholic, because it's just given me an opportunity to learn about the different perspectives and the way they love others and care for the poor and always have a heart for service.
I think that the Catholic faith can support that drive for social justice and that social change, and give a venue to be able to talk about it, and finding the right people to be able to challenge you in that aspect as well, in that idea.
What I love about the Catholic faith is that it is so rich, and so there's so many textures to it. I love the fact that we're a faith that calls us to be in right relationship with one another, that calls us not just to obviously be people of faith, be people that are in relationship with God, but that faith calls us to go out into the world and to minister to one another. That's something that very much motivates my work and motivates my sense of purpose in the world.
Our United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is helping to guide us in the call to the new evangelization. They invite us all into a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ and His Church. This week, producer Sharon Cross talks with Bishop David Zubik from the Diocese of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Bishop Zubik and Sharon talked about the importance of a dynamic parish life.
Today we're speaking with Bishop David Zubik of the Diocese of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Bishop Zubik.
Well, it's good to be with you and all of your listeners, Sharon. Thanks.
Thank you. The Bishop's Disciples Call to Witness document identifies certain methods through which Catholics can experience a renewal of their faith. And one of those methods is the local parish. Can you name some of the qualities that might help a parish be good at evangelizing?
I think, when you take a look at what are some of the qualities, the first has to be an element of prayer, and most especially around the notion of the Eucharist. And I say that because of all the titles, and there are many titles that we give to the Church, the most important title that we can give to it is the Church is the body of Christ. And so it's imperative that, first of all, a parish has the quality of inviting people to a deeper sense of prayer, beginning with the Eucharist and many other forms of prayer as well. Second of all, I think when we're talking about the new evangelization, what is absolutely essential is the virtue, if you will, the quality of hospitality. It's imperative that when people come into any church, they should feel welcomed, and so I think that the cultivation of the virtue of hospitality needs to happen, certainly in those ministers that are attendant in at Mass, the greeters, for example, the ushers, the extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist, the lectors. But I think it has to be invited and developed in all the parishioners, so that when people come into a church, it's important that they very much feel welcomed. I think, third of all, another characteristic that's absolutely essential is joy. I think, so oftentimes we as Christians, we as Catholics, don't look like we're saved. And I think that that element of joy needs to be fired up, in people's souls. I think one of the questions that I often ask with people in our own diocese is this one: are you excited about your faith? And if you're not, what are you doing to really get connected with Jesus? Because if you're connected with Him, you got to be excited about your faith, and what's attendant to that excitement is a deep sense of joy. I think fourth, for us to be people who are genuine about the new evangelization, it's important that we be reflective. So not only reflective on the power of God's Word, but reflective on how we do what we do as church, who we are as church, and that a lot of that reflection should begin obviously during the course of the celebration of the Eucharist, and particularly with the homily. But I think it also needs to be a centerpiece for discussion among pastoral councils of a parish and worship committees of a parish and a lot of the think tanks that are present in parishes. It's important for people to reflect and say, who we are who are we as church, and how can we be more the kind of church that Jesus really wants us to be. I think another quality that has to be a part of the new evangelization is the element of learning. That we can never really come to a point where we know everything that we need to know about our faith. As the Italians would say, basta. Now, I think it's a matter of always coming to learn more and more and more, so that we can provide, I think, the proper avenues for catechesis and learning, which also, I think, becomes an invitation for people to become more excited about the church and more involved in the church. And clarity, another essential quality that has to be a part of a parish, absolutely so, is that a parish has to be service-oriented. That what we do in the context of the Eucharist, how we carry out that virtue of hospitality, the reason why we carry on the joy of Jesus, the reflection that we do about who we are as church, the learning that's a part of, that reflection, has to lead to service, to genuine service, that we're reaching out to people who are in any kind of need, because that's an essential element of the gospel. So I would say that, for starters, those would be 6 very important parts of what I see as essential elements for a parish to be a good model of evangelization.
Well, it's been really great talking to you today. Is there anything you'd like to add as we wrap up?
I think the one element that has to embrace everything about the new evangelization is the element of love. I mean, that has to be more than just a coined phrase. It's a genuine encounter with God. We hear that when the letters of John are proclaimed that God is love, and I think all those original qualities that I spoke to about prayer and hospitality and joy and reflection and learning and service, that all has to be embraced by a genuine desire to love in the example of Jesus, which is not always easy, but always, heavenly, because I think that's where it all leads.
Thanks for joining us today, Bishop Zubik. For Call to Discipleship, I'm Sharon Cross.
I love being Catholic because I love the tradition of the Catholic faith, and no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you're going through, it's something that's always home.
I just love the people, the community that I find in this faith, and I love the sacraments, especially reconciliation and Mass, and I love sharing my faith with others, and faith is best shared and lived out.
I love my Catholic faith because it gives me an opportunity to reach out to others and to touch their hearts in different ways.
Here's today's Catholic treasure.
What do we call the sacrament by which the Church confers sacred ministry? The answer is the Sacrament of Holy Orders. This sacrament has 3 different degrees that from ancient times have made up the sacred ministry of the Church: bishops, priests, and deacons. The first 2 degrees, bishops and priests, participate in the priesthood of Jesus Christ, who is called the Great High Priest. The order of deacons is meant to help and serve the first 2 orders. The order of bishop is also known as the episcopate, from the Latin name for bishop. The order of priest is called the presbyterate, from the Greek word presbyter, which means elder. Diaconate, the order of deacon, comes from the Greek word for service. The name Holy Orders for this sacrament goes back to Roman times. In the Roman Empire, an order was an established civil body, particularly a governing body. Bishops, priests, and deacons are similarly established bodies within the Church. There are other groups in the Church referred to as orders as well. For example, the Order of Catechumens or those preparing for baptism. The sacramental act called ordination that makes a man a member of one of the 3 orders confers a special character on the recipient. The Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that ordination is more than simply a designation or choice by the community. Rather, this sacrament confers a gift of the Holy Spirit that permits the exercise of a sacred power which can come only from Christ Himself through His Church. The laying on of hands by a bishop with a specific prayer of consecration for the ordination to each of these 3 orders is the visible sign of this Catholic treasure, the Sacrament of Holy Orders.
You're listening to American Catholic Radio presents Disciples Called to Witness. Today on Discovering Faith, producer John Feaster talks with Father Gary Castor. Father Gary is the Catholic chaplain assigned to the campus of Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts. He spent the previous 19 years as chaplain at Illinois State and Illinois Wesleyan universities. He has authored several books, all for servant books. John and Father Gary discuss the idea of discipleship when the parish setting is a college campus.
Father Castor, thanks for joining us today on American Catholic Radio. I know that you're involved as a chaplain at a college. And what's unique about discipleship in a college setting?
Well, in my setting, the college is a secular college with no affiliation to any particular religion. My being here provides an opportunity for students who have arrived thinking that everybody in college has no faith.
Yeah.
It provides an opportunity for me to let them know that they're actually, the majority of students that arrive at college do come from a spiritual faith background,
mm-hmm.
and to let them know that that can continue while they're at college.
So let's talk about that for a second, because as disciples, each of us is challenged to share our faith with the world, with the people around us. How do you get students to take that step when they're feeling like such a minority?
Well, the first thing is to put them in contact with other students of faith, regardless of what that faith background is. You know, Mother Teresa was extremely beautiful about saying, you know, if I'm living my faith, that's going to make, you know, this person, you know, if they're a Jew, it's going to make them a better Jew. If this person is Muslim, it's going to make them a better Muslim. If this person is, you know, a Christian who's not Catholic, it's going to make them a better Christian. My responsibility is to live my faith. So the first thing is to bring students of faith together and to see and to support each other in living out their faith tradition in the context of the short amount of time that they're here on a college campus.
Sure, short but important and informative.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
And how do you do that? How do you bring people together around the idea that they are people of faith?
Food is a good idea. Once a month, the Catholic student group on this campus, they host a dinner, and it's open and available for any student who wants to come. It's after our Sunday Mass. The students came down for dinner, and the hosts of students were all mixed. There were Muslim students, Catholic students, Jewish students, some students from the secular society. The new evangelization I love because students ask young people ask questions. You would know this if you had children of college age. They love to ask questions. The new evangelization is not a program. I mean, any priest or deacon or layperson or bishop that would imply that it's a program, then they need a timeout. Because it's not a program. It is a person. It is the method that Jesus used and that the apostles used. It is the personal encounter. Somebody meeting somebody whose life is a living witness to the resurrection of Christ, even if they don't say that. It's the engagement that happens when somebody encounters a person whose life has been changed by Christ.
For Discovering Faith, I'm John Feaster.
This is Judy Zarek here to wrap up this edition of ACR Presents Disciples Called to Witness. In the bishop's document that we're constantly referring to here on our show, the one called Disciples Called to Witness, the New Evangelization, they end it with a list of parish reflection questions. These are questions that they want the diocesan and parish leadership to reflect upon as they prepare plans aimed at reproposing Christ to the faithful and inviting our brothers and sisters to the Lord's table. The very first question they ask is, how does the parish community provide people with opportunities for a personal encounter with Jesus Christ? To me, that's quite a question. You might think that just providing a good liturgy with good music and good preaching will do the trick. But I think there's even more there. A good liturgy that engages a person, to me, is the icing on the cake. I think that a personal encounter with Christ needs to begin with each of us as we walk into that church. We know that we encounter Christ every time we receive the Eucharist, but we can also encounter him in other people. Our guests today on ACR beautifully illustrated how becoming an active member of our parish helps us to do just that. God works in so many different ways in our lives. Let's keep our eyes open and make sure we don't miss any opportunity that might come our way to experience that personal encounter with our Lord. You can find ACR archive programs and more on the web at productions.franciscanmedia.org, where you can contact us and also meet our production team: Sharon Cross, John Feaster, Ron Riegler, Chris Holmes, Father Dan Anderson, and our executive producer, Matt Wilgoss. Music for our program was composed and arranged by Bobby Fisher. I'm Judy Zarek. Join me next time for another edition of American Catholic Radio Presents Disciples Called to Witness.
This program was brought to you by the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg and the Catholic Communication Campaign. Visit us on the web at hbgdiocese.org.